So this webinar is to introduce you to issue 2 of the SALSA Broker Storage and Distribution Production Standard. We'll talk today about why the standard has changed, the key changes, and where the requirements have been amended. And then we'll finish on how you can prepare. For anybody who doesn't know SALSA, we'll do a very quick introduction. SALSA stands for Safe and Local Supplier Approval. We're the Trusted Food Safety Certification Scheme designed specifically for small and growing food and drink businesses across the UK and Ireland. Our approach is built on safe food first and affordability. We're supportive and provide constructive, practical, and most importantly, relevant advice. In surveys, 90% of our members tell us that SALSA certification is essential to their business. So a couple of key dates here. So from the 1st of June 2026, the new issues were published and they were available to download from the website. From the 1st of September 2026, all SALSA audits will be conducted against these new issues. The Broker Storage and Distribution Standard moves to issue 2, and we're going to focus on this standard today. So this is for businesses who are handling, storing and transporting fully enclosed food and drinks. There are further webinars for each of the SALSA standards. The standards have been developed in collaboration with our SALSA Technical Advisory Committee. We have members from across the food and drink industry, and also with Cornwall County Council as our primary authority for assured advice. Standard changes are required because the food and drink industry doesn't stand still, and neither do the regulations and guidance that underpin it. SALSA needs to stay aligned with current best practice and regulatory expectations. So in addition, retailers, wholesalers and food service companies that recognise SALSA certification will expect the standards they rely on to be current and rigorous. So these updates ensure that SALSA certification continues to meet those expectations. And thirdly, we're strengthening the focus on 3 specific areas: food fraud resilience, management of change, and product identification and traceability. These changes support the standards evolution. If you're already running a good food business with solid systems, much of this will feel familiar. The updated standards support and strengthen what you're already doing, and they're not designed to catch anyone out. As a SALSA member, we would recommend that you use the interpretation guide as your main reference document. It's been enhanced and carefully written to offer best practice guidance for the requirements. The glossary gives you further guidance on the technical phrases used throughout the standard and interpretation guide. It provides useful links for further industry guidance to support your understanding. The tools and tips are all being rewritten behind the scenes, and the updates will be published across the summer. We'll be focusing on the new clauses first. So before we dive into these changes, it's important to say that your documentation numbering doesn't need to mirror the SALSA standard clauses. So a little bit of background: the Broker Storage and Distribution Issue 1 was launched in summer 2021, and it's become out of alignment with the other SALSA standards with regards to numbering. So we've therefore taken the decision this time to bring the standard numbering into closer alignment. It's especially useful for those businesses who have dual audits. So whilst in practical terms the requirements haven't changed significantly for Issue 2, we've essentially renumbered. So please do make use of the summary of change documents. This goes into a lot of detail of those numbers. As long as you know where everything is and you can locate it easily, so it's absolutely fine from our perspective. And we recognise that many of you are moving towards digital record keeping and traceability systems. So the key principle here is your systems and records must be readily accessible. You can check this as part of your in-house self-assessment processes. So it's really worth thinking ahead about how you will present your records and procedures during your SALSA audit, thinking that this is a way that allows the audit process to run smoothly and efficiently. Food safety culture was introduced into SALSA standards in 2022 and has now been incorporated in the introduction for Issue 2 of Broker Storage and Distribution Standard. There are 6 foundations for food safety culture. In practice, this starts at the top, with the leadership needing a clear strategy and plan to ensure safe food is produced consistently, not just on a good day, but every day. But it can't stay at the top. Every person in the business needs to understand why food safety matters and feel genuinely committed to it, from the production floor to the office. So this means clear roles and responsibilities. Everybody should know what their part is and how it fits into the wider picture. Then there's the system itself. Your controls need to be verified. Your documentation needs to be current. Nothing should be assumed. Food safety doesn't stand still. The standards expect you to keep improving, staying up to date with changes in science, technology, and best practice. And finally, none of this works without the right resources, the right facilities, the right equipment, the right support. So safe, hygienic food handling is the norm and not the exception. This is what food safety culture looks like when it's working well, and the changes and new issues are designed to help you get there. The 2026 issues have been built around 3 pillars of change. So we're looking for food fraud resilience, management of change, and the product identification and traceability. So we'll look at what those mean in practice. Food fraud resilience. The focus of the change is improving understanding of SALSA members to the threat of food fraud. You need to understand the risks of food fraud, adulteration, and substitution for the products that you're buying. This is a desktop exercise. It's already required as part of the SALSA standards. The new issue increases the focus on applying appropriate controls and keeping up to date with new risks. We're looking for you to have that broader knowledge of the potential risks to raw materials and to the industry as a whole. We're not expecting you to be doing lots of expensive lab testing and analysis, but you should be completing a documented annual review, or more frequently if that's needed. It's about putting in place the controls. Management of change. It's a new requirement intended to be supportive. Making change is a risky time for any type of business. There's an increase in the potential for errors. So thinking and checking before introducing changes. So that might be purchasing or handling of new products, changing a process, packaging, machinery, and any amendments to the existing ways of working. It's an opportunity to look at everything and do it right first time. Traceability and product identification is a legal requirement. So the new issues are really focusing on robust traceability throughout all the stages of the process that you handle. Materials need to be labelled and easily identified at all times. You need to have a system that works for you that provides that traceability. So let me hand over to Sarah, and she's going to look through those changes that have happened in the standard.
Thank you, Sarah. Okay, so we'll start with the clauses updated and refocused. So 1.1 is training. As you know, training in general is a key part of the SALSA standard. And then just looking under clause 113, particularly the interpretation guide, we are looking that the refresher plan exists and includes training against your latest procedures. So for example, any allergen controls, CCP monitoring, hygiene standards, foreign body controls, labelling checks and labelling controls. For clause 1.2, personal hygiene rules are now all consolidated under one single clause to bring us in line with the food and drink standard. For clause 132, cleaning procedures, you should have evidence that the chosen methods and materials for cleaning are effective and are doing the right job. And for clause 133, for cleaning chemicals, ensure the cleaning chemicals are food safe and carefully considered, then that the chemicals are used correctly, they're dosed correctly, whether that's hot water or cold water, for the right contact time, and then rinsed away. So we're asking you to keep a controlled list of the approved chemicals on site and that they're stored correctly with their detailed labels and/or instructions. Ensure all chemicals are food safe and that you're not using any domestic supermarket products. Domestic type products are absolutely fine for the offices, ancillary areas and canteen. So just to summarise then, we are looking to see that cleaning methods are effective for your business and the products you are producing or handling. Ensure that all the chemicals are used safely. So looking now at allergen management. As a business, you need to know what allergens you're bringing on site and have a detailed risk assessment to base the cross-contamination controls on. The procedure needs to be in place to make sure that the controls are there, and this is going to include all aspects of checking the labelling, marketing materials, printed materials, and websites for you. So looking now at section 1.5, so this is process, environmental, and equipment control. So businesses will need to ensure they have documented systems and records to verify their processes of controlling of your goods. One of the key points here is that goods intake records must be retained to demonstrate that the supplied goods consistently comply with your documented specifications. These may include things like environmental controls, temperature controls, humidity, and where applicable, these may be digital recording and logging systems for you now. Ensure you have systems in place for process controls and that they're frequently reviewed, particularly if you have a digital system, if it alarms, who and how are the alarms received, and consider out-of-hours checking. The interpretation guide now asks you to document the typical dwell time for products if handling products out of refrigeration, such as a picking and packing operation, or if you're acting as a fulfillment operation, what that dwell time is for you. Okay, so calibration. The 2 calibration clauses have been retitled. The idea is making the overall purpose much clearer. So clause 154 is for external calibration, for any equipment linked to safety or legality testing. So for example, this may be weighing scales for retail traded products or your temperature probes. Clause 155 is for in-house verification systems, such as the in-house tests you might do monthly for your temperature probes in hot and cold water against the master probe, or this could be your weekly scale checks using the calibrated test weights. Okay, so now looking at specifications and supplier approval. So there's some additional requirements here, and the focus now is if you're using any subcontracted processing or packing of products. So for clause 162, businesses need to have a written specification for all the raw materials and for any subcontracted packing on processing. So these specifications can be held digitally, maybe with a summary of them all in an Excel file with the date received and the date of review. The clause now asks that you review your specs annually and ensure all specs are in place and that they are up to date, and just keep a record of when you did this. The clause 163 details the requirements for goods intake. So a procedure is needed for the checks required, and also here to highlight what to look for to detect adulteration, substitution, maybe different packaging, different branding, or a different country of origin. During the primary authority review of the new updates, they wanted us to include a focus here on goods intake for looking at food fraud awareness. And food goods intake inspection was identified as a key role for detection at the point of exception for food fraud. So moving on then to 164, which is one of the pillars of change then, the interpretation guide has introduced the controls for grey market goods, such as those identified from markets such as the USA or overseas. And examples here can include snacks, drinks, breakfast cereals, or confectionery that may have non-compliant labelling or unauthorised or excessive additives such as food colourings and may not be allowed into the UK or European market. Okay then, so looking at section 1.8, this is now worded as waste management and recycling and brings us in line with legislation updates and licence disposal. Section 1.9 now reads as pest management rather than pest control. So the methods of pest control used on site shall be trained out to all your staff so that they understand the types of control used, such as your baits or your pots, electric fly killers, moth pots, etc. But also to include the GMP standards, such as door controls or hygienic waste handling. The BATE plans always sit in the top 10 of the actions raised across SALSA audits. So we've added clarity to the BATE plan clause to make sure the review process is made clearer as to what that clause is after. For clause 111.1, businesses need to put in place a record to demonstrate post-maintenance inspection and release back to production. For clause 112.1, there is an added focus on storage facilities and controls in place for temperature management. Businesses will need to demonstrate they're completing pre-load checks for cleanliness, odour, pests, and temperature capability where that's relevant to your business. If you do need to carry out transit trials, then these need to be documented as completed and whether or not they were successful. The interpretation guide gives you a lot of detail for running these transit trials and also that they're conducted under worst case scenario conditions such as warmer weather. Okay, so let's look at the updated interpretation guide for HACCP, particularly clauses 2.1 and for 2.2. So the first clauses now in section 2 really do focus on the HACCP scope and introduction to the products that you handle. The SALSA standard views the product description as an important way of explaining the food or drinks that you handle and that you have an understanding of the food safety factors that make them safe. These can be things like the alcohol content, the salt content, and any finished product packaging formats, for example. If you handle products of different food safety profiles, they should really have a separate product description. So this could be, for example, chilled, ready-to-eat products, such as catering packs, versus chilled salad pots, versus frozen bags of vegetables, or even ambient stable tins and jars. So the HACCP clauses in broker storage and distribution are now aligned with Codex and also now aligned with the food and drink standard numbering. So this has introduced clause 2.3, so the requirement to identify the intended customer base for your products. So for example, are you selling directly to nursing homes, schools, hospitals, or groups that are maybe more susceptible to foodborne illness? So this leads to you having therefore enhanced control measures and strict food safety practices that are applied throughout your processes. So clause 2.9 is asking businesses to think about the CCPs they have identified and the controls required. So a quick recap here from the glossary. A CCP limit is the point where food changes from safe to unsafe. The validation of CCPs is now required. So, i.e., what are the limits you need to consistently meet? The CCP limits can be justified by making reference to specific industry guidelines or legislation. For example, the limits for storage temperatures used so that you can detail why you have chosen those temperature limits for your business. An example of that might be if you handle raw chicken, that has to be less than 4 degrees. And then in the HACCP, you would then quote the legislation appropriate for that. Okay, so focusing now on HACCP team knowledge. The HACCP team clauses are now focusing on knowledge and competence with understanding of your food safety factors. Members need to demonstrate they understand the HACCP principles, and that this is shown in a robust and an accurate HACCP study with evidence of the safe food and drink they are handling. The requirement is to demonstrate understanding and competency of Codex-based HACCP for the training, and this ideally will be external training. There is a variety of training courses and training styles available, and we would recommend that you use a course delivered directly by a trainer, as this allows for questions and discussions. Members should ensure they have HACCP-trained production staff who are specifically trained against your controls, including any CCPs, and this is to ensure consistent cover for any absences or holidays. So focusing now on non-conformances and the investigations. The non-conforming product clauses have been updated to align with the Food and Drink Standard. So firstly, review your non-conforming materials procedure and ensure it covers all stages of handling, storage and dispatch. And then secondly, review your complaints procedure. Ensure that it includes the steps of investigating the cause and, if appropriate, working out the root cause of the complaint, taking appropriate corrective actions and keeping a record of the process. So now looking at clause 342. This clause for incident procedure challenge is always in our top 10 of actions raised. So we've added more clarity to the clause and the interpretation guide. To test this effectively, businesses need to choose a realistic test scenario and then a record of the decision-making process, the traceability and evidence captured and checked. The challenge of testing the communication details and the overall timing should be included, and keep any evidence of any learning or actions that you raise. And that the test covers the business's real distribution of products out to customers or maybe other business to businesses. You also need to include a review that you hold the correct contact, phone and email details, and this most likely will include any out-of-hours contacts for customers. Okay, so looking now at specifications and labelling. So to keep in line with supplier approval requirements, specifications are required for all the finished products, work in progress, maturation, non-pre-packed products, and the new requirement has come in for subcontracted processing. Ensure you have clear technical alignment between specs, labels, and any supplier or contract manufacturing agreements. Labelling, as you know, control of labelling generation and artwork sign-off and all labelling information, including marketing content, is essential for legality and the safety of the products you store and handle. And this clause has been updated to reflect this. Businesses may need stronger governance over any product claims you may make, such as ingredients or allergen statements on the products. And this should be reflected across into any website details, any brochures, sales sheets, social media content, and customer specifications. So not just the on-pack labels, but making sure that everything is compliant. And just to note here, the auditors do look at your website, online sales platforms, and social media in their preparation before coming to visit you for an audit. So looking now on consistent good manufacturing practice procedures and standards. So we have clause 447 and 448. So these are good manufacturing standards. These have a clear link to food safety culture. Businesses will need a documented GMP contamination prevention framework that includes all aspects of foreign body control, hygiene standards. You might have different zones, different segregations, where relevant, your housekeeping standards and your, handling practices. To support, there needs to be a structured GMP audit or inspection schedule. So for example, this might be weekly, monthly, or quarterly. And this needs to cover all production and handling areas and include your ancillary areas. You should encourage an open culture of recording and noting any actions required, or maybe this will include some refresher training of staff. So just looking now at some clauses that have been separated into two parts. There have been a number of clauses that have been split out just to help understanding. So training has been split out for the procedure and then the second part for the records. Allergens, as we've already discussed, we've reworded the identification of all products purchased, and then for the risk assessment for any contains or may contains. So that now sits as two clauses. And again for HACCP, making clause 2.1 about the scope and the products handled. and 215, 216 about the competency of the team and the operational monitoring. The traceability wording is actually unchanged. This now just sits as 2 clauses. So 1 clause for backwards and 1 clause for forwards traceability challenge. Site security and digital security plan have been separated. So businesses that use any form of digital records, such as temperature logs, traceability, CCP monitoring, ERP, or any cloud drives, will need a strong cyber resilience plan. And the interpretation guide gives you some great links for advice and a useful checklist to follow. The changing facilities have been split, and the intent of these clauses hasn't changed. So 1, 2, 3 is for the personal requirements for the members, for the staff and the visitors. And then 4, 4, 4 is for the actual physical premises. So appreciate there's probably quite a lot of words on the screen here. Really just want you to focus on the red wording where it has been updated. So the statements of intent are at the top line headings of each of the 4 SALSA sections. They are auditable and they give an overview of each of those sections. So a quick reminder of the wording to support the statements of intent. And as I've said, the key changes are just in the red text here. So just minor word changing to run through. So section 1 introduces the word consistently, producing and handling safe food and drink. Section 2 just separates out micro, chemical, physical and allergen, and they've just been listed out to aid focus for the hazard analysis and the risk assessment. For section 3, that your documents are readily accessible, and we're particularly referring here to any digital systems that they're easy to search and also easy to present. And in section 4, we're just adding some clarity here for layout, segregation and flow, so that if the factory isn't laid out correctly, we can raise this under the whole statement of intent. And then we've just added in that word digital for the security requirement. And I'll hand you back now to Sarah Hall to finish the training.
So the SALSA standards have been updated for 2026. So it's possible your next audit will be against a new issue. So don't forget that we are here to support you and help you prepare. SALSA members have access to exclusive support resources via their membership portal, which includes the updated interpretation guide, previously guidance notes, a detailed summary of changes with a member version available, the glossary and the tools and tips. Now here's the important thing. It doesn't matter whether your next audit is in the autumn 26 or not until summer 27. The time to start understanding these changes is now. So don't wait until your audit is around the corner, because the earlier you start, the smoother the transition will be. We are going to be running some general drop-in sessions in July, so just so you can get your questions answered at those sessions by the SALSA team. You can see we've got 2 here, one on the 24th of July at 10 a.m. and another on the 30th at 5 p.m. And you can use a SALSA mentor for expert one-to-one guidance as you review your food safety management system. As a member, you would have access to the self-assessment checklist. This document is designed as a template for a detailed assessment of how you're complying with the requirements of the SALSA standard and the interpretation guide. If you use this in conjunction with a summary of changes document, as you're aligning your systems and practices with a new issue. You can also use this document for your internal review, and we recommend you complete your review in sections across the year with an annual closeout. The self-assessment can also be used as a gap analysis tool for a first audit. For issue 7, not only is the PDF version, but members can access a new digital self-assessment tool. This tool is accessible from the member area in resources, and it's for all issues auditable from the 1st of September. It provides a practical tool and efficient tracking of your internal reviews. Some of the key features, there are a clause-by-clause layout with a built-in interpretation accessible for each requirement. It allows for recording of evidence with action planning, team assignments and due dates. And you can get an action plan overview, which brings all outstanding actions into a single view. You can print off PDF progress reports for management reviews or team briefings, and it gives you completion tracking with the ability to start a fresh assignment at any time. It's confidential by design. Self-assessments are completely private. They're stored securely on your member portal. They're not checked, reviewed, or accessed by SALSA. Auditors do not see a member's self-assessment unless the member chooses to share it with them. It's a tool designed to support your food safety management from within the business. So just to finish, let's recap the key dates and support available. Our new standards were published on the 1st of June, and all audits from the 1st of September 2026 will be conducted against the new issues. We're running some drop-in sessions during the summer, with the 2 sessions already planned for July. So whatever your situation, whether you've been through 10 SALSA audits or you're considering joining for the first time, the message is the same. Start preparing now and don't do it alone. The resources are there and the support is there, and we're there to support you every step of the way. So thank you very much for watching, and let's all enjoy raising the standards together.